Hello everyone, my name is Tammy Thompson and I'm the Public Relations Coordinator at West Kentucky Community and Technical College, and on this program we're going to be discussing our one-book read of Saints at the River by Ron Rash. He's a New York Times best-selling author who will be on our campus in March. I am also on our one-book committee, and I'd like to introduce our guests who are my fellow one-book committee members. I have Kim Russell, who is our English Program Coordinator. I have Brian Heller, who is the director of our Clemens Fine Arts Center, and Amy Sullivan, who is the interim director of library services here on campus. Welcome. Like I said, we're going to be discussing Saints at the River by Ron Rash, and so I just would first of all like to tell the audience, what is a one-book read, Amy?
Well, our one-book read is a community effort to promote literacy and to hopefully eliminate illiteracy in our region. It's begun here on West Kentucky Community and Technical College campus, and it also involves the dual credit high school students who are affiliated with our college, as well as the entire community, area book clubs, area high school districts. We try to involve everyone in this community read. We're all reading the same book this year, and we do that each year. And then we culminate the read with the visit from the author. And like you said, he's coming in March.
Great, great. Well, there used to be a one-book read every other year, and then this year it's changed. Tell me a little bit about that.
That's right. We first started in 2008, and it became such a big event for us. It has increased over the years, and the word has gotten out. It's just spread so widely around the community that the involvement has become the same as far as who participates and our community partners and such. So we decided that we will just do this every year and make it a one-book read every year.
To keep the community involved.
That's correct. For example, last year, Orphan Train by Christina Baker Klein was our one-book read, and we began in our Crounce Hall for her presentation. But what happened that evening was we had such a crowd that came, we had to actually move to a different venue in our Clemens Fine Arts Center. Crounce Hall, for example, holds I think around 150 to 160 people, and we outgrew that venue and had to move that evening over to Clemens, and so the participation there allowed for 350 or so people to come that evening.
It was a great event.
It was.
Speaking about the other one-book reads, Kim, tell me some of the other one-book reads that we've had in the past and how they've, each one has grown in popularity.
When we started in 2008, a staff member on campus had suggested the idea that we take a look at Rocket Boys by Homer Hickam, and he's a real rocket scientist, and his book inspired the movie October Sky, and it was just such a wonderful event, such a great experience for everyone who participated that we really started to look at doing it again and again. So we have read The Art of Racing in the Rain by Garth Stein. A few years ago we had David Baldacci here on campus, and we read his novel Wish You Well. That was just amazing to imagine that David Baldacci, who is just stocked full in every bookstore you go to, and he was here in Paducah for us. We have read Jeanette Walls, who is the author of The Glass Castle. We read her book Half Broke Horses. And then last year we had Christina Baker Klein.
And they've, like we said, they've each grown in popularity. Brian, actually Ron Rash will be in your space, the Clemens Fine Arts Center, but this is you're new to Paducah, and this is your first one-book read experience with a one-book read. Tell me what you think about the whole process.
I think it's a great program. I love the community involvement. For me personally, I like to see people from all over the community coming to campus and getting something of value. So this is a great program, and bringing in high-profile authors certainly fits in with our mission on campus and for the college to fulfill an educational function for the community as a whole. So I think it's a great program. I'm excited to be part of it, and I'm glad to see this.
Me too, me too. All right, so let's just talk, how did we first decide that we were going to choose Saints at the River for this year's one-book read?
We have a small selection committee who get together. We have a representative from the English department and one of our vice presidents and another faculty member. And we get together, and Amy has joined us this year, which has been a great addition. Before Amy was with us, we had Gail Robinson Butler, who was at the theater. And we get together and we read and we read and we read and gradually whittle down to what we really feel like our readers, our community will respond to, something that we feel like has worthwhile things to say, that can be a good all-around cross-curricular learning experience and hopefully provoke some great discussions and teach us something. So we had several contenders before we chose Saints at the River, and this just ended up being the thing that we all felt would really just bring some enrichment to our community.
Great. And Amy, you have a new role this year with the One Book Read. You're actually the chair of the committee.
I am.
So how has that changed your dynamic of how you participate with this process?
I was a member of the committee for the past several years as well. So as far as my role chairing it, we do other events along the way besides just preparing for the author and discussing the book. We promote in other ways. We do different events. For example, we've had a media discussion, a media panel discussion, which we'll talk about in a minute when we talk about kind of the themes of the book, but different events along the way through the year that we bring the community in to participate in as well, just in preparation and more discussions for the book. So I've also been involved in the selection committee. This year was my first year, and it was we coincide with preparing for next year's read. So right now we're in the process of selecting for next year. That has not been finalized yet, but always what our goal is to announce that at the author presentation. When they come, we try to announce the next read for next year.
To get everybody prepared, get your book now.
That's right. It's an ongoing thing. So.
Great. Well, let's talk a little bit about the book itself, Saints of the River. It's fresh on my mind. I just recently finished it. There were a few chapters in it that I just could not put down. I mean, I was turning the pages and so excited to figure out what was going to happen next. I love that when I read a book. There are really several conflicts and sub-conflicts in the book, but there's two main conflicts that I'd like to discuss. So, who would like to jump in? The first one, the main one, of course, is a drowning. So, go ahead, Amy.
Sure. The premise, the very beginning of the book, there is a 12-year-old girl who does drown in the Tennessee River, which is in South Carolina. And the problem is that her body becomes lodged in an eddy in the river, and the family wants to retrieve her body. And the Tennessee River is actually a wild and scenic river, which is classified as that. It's for the environmentalist group that is
it's federally protected.
Federally protected, yes. There are lots of rules and regulations for a river, so the river can't be disturbed. They want to preserve its state. So they propose putting a dam in the river to be able to retrieve this young girl's body, and the environmentalists become very enraged about this, and so the media becomes involved and all of that. So that's the main plot of the book.
So tell me, the very opening of the book describes her drowning, which, and then the actual book begins, and I thought that was really, because sometimes they do the setting, it's in South Carolina, and they do all of that stuff before they really get into those conflicts.
It's really the rising action before we even have exposition. And I think a lot of people get frustrated with books because the exposition may go on too long and you don't know.
Exposition, explain that to
Well, the exposition is that opening part of the book where we're just getting a sense of who these characters are and where are we, and getting the lay of the land a little bit. And the problem is a lot of times if that seems to go on too long before something's happening, that's when we lose interest a little bit. Certainly not a problem this book, because it just really starts in with the plot and goes before we really know anybody.
Well, I have a 14-year-old son, and so this kind of, I have two children, but he's 14. He's really close to Ruth's age, who drowns. And as a parent, that's hard to read. I mean, that's hard to read that this child, it could have happened to anybody. She didn't realize what was happening. She was just going out in the shallows.
And she's a trained swimmer.
Yes, she was a trained swimmer. Had American
Red Cross
training.
certification.
Right.
Yeah, and she just, it seems very simple and innocent. She just wants to stand in this river and have her feet in 2 states at one time, so she can tell her friends that she had her feet like that. And before she knows it,
She swept away.
yes.
And that's sort of part of the warning of you don't go into water that you're not familiar with. It's a safety warning, and she was a trained swimmer, but she ignored the warnings. And
that kind of brings in the issue of another conflict in the book, which is the local people of the community and these outsiders. And the locals in some way, especially when they were pushed and when they were ridiculed for being hillbillies, they said, well, we know better than to
This is a whitewater
children
river. This is
do
dangerous,
this. Right.
you know. And some mean things were said in retaliation for that, making them feel like they were inferior. And some of these visitors you're talking about are the reporters that come in. Later on in the book, some politicians and all of these things that happen. But before we go into who those reporters are and how it really ties the book together, just talk a little bit about that environmental issue. What is so, I know it's federally protected, but what is so important to the main character, Luke Miller? Why is it so important to him that this does not happen, that this stays pristine and nothing is damaged in this river?
It's his life's work, protecting this river. He feels that it's this sacred place, and he has almost sworn his just allegiance and love to a place rather than to a person. It's his mission. It's the reason he gets up in the morning, and he worries that allowing any sort of tampering, even this dam that they're going to put up and take down in one day,
Temporarily.
one day, that sets a negative precedent, and it puts the river at risk then for land developers and other people who would say, well, what we're doing is harmless. So he does have some compelling arguments, because you do, once you cross that line and do anything to compromise that protected position, it's dangerous.
And he comes across as a little bit cynical. As you say, he's given his loyalty to the nature and natural preservation.
Not people.
And because he seems kind of jaded on humanity. So very cynical,
Yes.
but very passionate about his environmental beliefs.
Well, and he is very passionate, but the other side of that issue, the passion, is just as intense. So Amy, tell me a little bit about this reporter, particularly the main character, the reporters. Why is she such an integral part of this particular location and story?
Maggie Glenn is from this area originally, and she has moved away and has a career elsewhere, but she is called back to cover this story, and she has ties to this area. And
She's
so
from there. She's
she
from
is
the
from
town.
there, correct. And her family does still live there. Her father still lives there. So she is not only faced with covering this story and this emotional story, but she brings back her own family relationships and past when she comes back to town to cover the story, bringing in a past relationship with her father and some difficulties she's had there, and her brother and her mother who has passed away, and different things like that. So she becomes an integral part of the story in 2 ways.
She does, because not only is she having to cover it and try to be objective about the story, she has ties to how the river became wild and scenic as well. So tell me a little bit, whoever wants to, Amy.
She actually has had a relationship with Luke in the past, who is the strong character from the environmentalist
mentioned.
perspective. And she has some experience being part of that with him. She knows what it's like to travel the river. She spent time with him doing that, so she knows exactly where he's coming from and what this means.
She actually helped helped in the process of getting that designation for that river.
She did. She participated in that as well. So she has a very tough position right now to be able to have to come in to do that, because she knows that side of it. But she also knows the family perspective as well and how difficult it is. And she's a photographer. And so she does capture a certain moment that affects the whole outcome of the situation. So it's very difficult for her to decide what to capture and when.
And it really does. This image that she captures is, of course, of the father of Ruth, who has inner turmoil, not only because he's lost his daughter, but because he has to also deal with the grief of his wife, who actually dove in the river several times, but he was unable to because he could not swim. So that turmoil inside of him, capturing that image of him looking onto the river, really, like you said, turned the whole outcome of that book. So she's really pitted against this image she captured and that group that she was a part of before. They get really angry with her.
What I think is interesting about Maggie's role as part of the media, and I think that this is one of the other themes and issues that we think about with the book, is she realizes as she's taking that photograph of him that he's represented to look as if he's standing there and crying. The truth is, she knows that that's not what she's that's not the truth.
Exactly what happened.
That's not exactly what happened, and I think that brings a lot of interesting questions into mind for readers and our students, talking about the role of the media and the way that the media represents things and how those representations
are accepted as truth when they may not exactly be what you're really seeing.
Right. Right, and
so
I
you
think
have
that's a
to-
really interesting conversation that we can have.
It really highlights that when you're seeing a photograph or seeing a news story or reading a news story, you're getting a certain portrayal,
Yes.
which isn't necessarily the whole story.
And actually, one of our students, and Kim may talk a little bit about this, we did have an essay contest, and we do this with our One Book Reads. We have a student essay contest, and one of the interesting essays did talk about that and how the media does represent different ways, different things. And it was a wonderful essay,
Yes.
well written, and certainly brought up a lot of good discussion points.
Well, I want to touch back what you mentioned, Brian, about Luke. They had meetings. They had town hall meetings where everybody from each side got to come and tell their perspective. Got quite heated, as you can imagine, both not only from the environmental issue and trying to raise Ruth's body, but from the locals and the outsiders, as you said. But Luke, at one point, is on the river, and he actually goes under. And he, at one point, says, I almost didn't want to come back. It's so perfect there, which is, survival instinct is, trying to get out. And of course he did, but he had that peace being in that river. And he actually brings that up at one of these meetings, which gets particularly heated, because he actually says to the family of Ruth,
If this happened to my daughter.
which he doesn't have a child,
Right,
right.
he doesn't have children. But he says, if this did happen to my daughter, I can imagine no more beautiful, holy place for her to be than this as her burial site.
So what do you think about that? What do you think about, as parents, we all have children, as parents, what do you think about that?
I don't want to think about that.
No.
I mean, but your perspective, from Luke's perspective, that's what he truly believes. He was not trying to just say this to save the river, because he was there, and if he had drowned there, he would have wanted his body to stay there. I mean, from all of the way he describes it. But of course, Herb Kowalski does not appreciate that at all. How did it make you feel?
Oh, go ahead.
That's his opinion, and obviously his opinion was not shared by others. So I think different people can approach it different ways. As a parent, some parents might respect that and say, well, the law says this is a natural area, and it really is beautiful, perfect, pristine, preserved, so let's leave it that way. But another parent might say, as Kowalski did, no, this is my daughter and I have to get her back. So I can see how, and that's not a conflict that's resolved. Even through the book, that conflict is not resolved. And I think that reflects the reality that different people have, in some cases, different values. So, we might not agree as parents what we would do, but each of us has to make our own choice. And I think that's part of the story.
Well,
And everyone has some compelling arguments. That's what's interesting too. That's the way it is in real life.
Yes.
There's a lot of gray, and there are no really good guys or really bad guys in this argument. They all make some compelling points. Ruth Kowalski's mother, I believe that her main argument is the fact that religiously she believes that she needs to bring her daughter back for a proper burial so that her soul can be at peace. And how do you argue with that?
And Kowalski even wavered at that moment, and he thought Luke made a compelling argument, but he did say, for my wife, for our family, we have to do this. And he said he understood that. For a minute he thought, well, that makes a good point, but this is how he felt and his family felt, and he had to do that for his family.
And he had the resources to do it. In the book, he is a successful businessman, whereas maybe not other people would have those kind of connections to bring the politicians to bear, to make those kinds of exceptions that they had to make to get those waivers for the environmental purposes.
That's an interesting point.
Well, so let's just cover, there are some other issues with Maggie. First of all, she's not the only reporter there documenting all this. Actually, a Pulitzer Prize nominated writer, Alan Hemphill, has been assigned to go and write the story. And he has to really work, I think, to be objective. Why?
He had a similar situation in his past because he, as a father, lost his daughter and mother in a tragic situation, which is relayed in throughout the book. But he is, as you say, very difficult for him to remain objective as a reporter because he went through that loss and feels his own share of guilt, which affects him. So I think he has a little bit of conflict also in this story.
And one thing that he points out, a comment that he had made, you said that he had been traveling a lot when his daughter and his wife wasn't really the father that he had wanted to be. So that's part of his conflict. Now they're gone, and now he sees himself probably in this father that's lost Ruth. But he has this past perception about photography, and that, really a photograph really has to have that human element of word to go with it, which he kind of recants later, because they always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. And truly, the photograph that she took of him at the river looking forlornly? Yes, thank you. Into the river, really, in a lot of ways, could have told the story without a lot of wording. So
I think one of the things that we've been doing in English 101 is asking our students to come up with similar examples from our own media and our history. For example, I think the recent picture of I believe it's a soldier carrying the little boy, the little baby who has drowned, trying to come to freedom. I don't think that there's any story that can really communicate that as well as that one image. And it was the image that made people finally think about the plight of those people. So these things, there are a lot of real life echoes from what's being discussed in this book. And I think that that's an interesting thing that our readers, our students, can think about with this.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left, so I want to go to Brian, and I want to talk a little bit about, we have like Amy had said, we've done several things leading up to Ron Rash's visit in March. We've had an essay contest in the fall, we have one in the spring, we've done a panel discussion with local media and Coast Guard representatives discussing that exact issue, river safety, how the media is objective. But I want to discuss, we also had a photo contest and an exhibit, so tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, the photo contest is related to the themes of the book. It was open to everyone, students, public, everyone, and it's closed now, but we have a nice selection of artwork on display at the Clemens Fine Arts Center Gallery that was just put up last week. And so those photos that were, and it's completely at the discretion of the participants in that photo contest as to what the images are. A lot of them obviously are images of rivers or water, scenery, but those are on display in the gallery and will be on display through the event in March. And they are being judged by faculty from the Paducah School of Art and Design, and there will be winners announced at the event when Ron Rash is here in town.
So tell me, when will he be here?
Okay, so on March 8th, we will be having an opening reception at 6 p.m. at the Clemens Fine Arts Center in the Student Center. We'll have some food available, some refreshments available for people to enjoy, and people will be able to look at the artwork on display and see what they think.
Winners will be announced, like you
Winners
said.
will be announced at that event. And I think we're getting a Literacy Week proclamation from the mayor. And the essay contest winners are also going to be announced at that time. And the Dean of the Paducah School of Art and Design will be announcing the winners of the photo contest. And then after our little reception, then we will be moving into the Clemens Fine Arts Center Auditorium for a presentation by Ron Rash at 7 p.m. He'll be talking about the book. We will be able to ask him questions. And this is all free and open to the public. So this is kind of a really big thing that the college does for the community. And it's one of the things, you know, coming in as a new person, I think is really spectacular. This event is all put on by the college for the whole public for free. This New York Times best-selling author will be talking about his current book. And after his presentation, he will be signing copies. So people will be able to bring their copies that they've read and have Ron sign them. And then the next day, on March 9th, we'll be doing the same presentation just for the students.
Yes.
So the college students, dual credit students, will be able to have the same talk with the author, ask questions, which is a great opportunity for students at the college to meet a best-selling author to talk about that book.
Some
Well,
students may never have an opportunity to do that, so this is a fantastic way that we can provide that for our students.
Absolutely. We only have about 30 seconds left. I would like to also, he will be here on the college campus, but we have several community partners, and we'd like to, of course, recognize them in their participation in this one book read.
Yes, we're so grateful for the help of all of our partners, West Kentucky Community and Technical College and our College Academy and Dual Credit Program, McCracken County Public Library, McCracken County Public Schools, McCracken County Information Network, which is also McNet, Paducah Public Schools, McCracken County Cooperative Extension Office, Paducah Convention and Visitors Bureau, and WKMS Radio at Murray State University. All play integral roles in all of our events each year, so we are so grateful for their help and participation.
Wonderful. Well, I want to thank you all for joining me, and I'd like to thank you for watching this program about our one book read of Saints at the River. Please be looking on the lookout for all of our activities that we have. You can also go on the WKCTC website under the library webpage and find more information about the program. He will be here on March 8th and 9th. You don't want to miss that. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.